Hi, I'm Joe Bergeron. I'm here to talk about the quadratic, and specifically, I spoke with the algebra teachers here at North Pontotoc High School, and they provided some examples that I'm going to go over that go along with the quadratic unit that Miss Lott made a copy of. So if you are here for instruction, I would suggest please start with Miss Lott, watch her video, and then come to me and watch this also. I might have a slightly different take, but essentially I'm doing what Miss Lott has asked us to do. Okay. That being said, forgive me, I'm going to peek at the problems as we talk about them. And again, we're talking about factoring. The quadratic equation is simply one more method that we use to factor a quadratic equation. And if you remember correctly, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 is where we're getting our information from. Now, you see A and you see B and you see C and you think, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, we can do an example of that and just simply say 4x squared plus 6x plus 2 equals 0. So instead of using those letters, what we've done here is we've put numbers, okay? And we can plug in any numbers that we want if it is a solvable quadratic equation. And remember, a quadratic equation, when you graph it, is going to make that U shape, okay? Whether it be up or down, okay? Negative or positive in its coefficient, all right? But I'm getting ahead. Like I said, what I was given was a set of problems to go along or to be a companion with what we've got. Now, the first thing we're going to start with is the quadratic formula, because without that, there is no way that we can factor these using the quadratic formula. We need to know the formula first. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write it up here. B squared negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac, and we're going to divide that by 2 times a. Okay, so no matter what we do, we're going to go back to that formula. All right, so the first problem that we have is x squared minus 9 equals 0. Okay, now this is a warm-up. Now, what can we see about x squared and 9? They're both what? They're both perfect squares. X times x is x squared, and 3 times 3 equals 9. Okay, so what we will do is, since we know that they're both perfect squares, we'll put one of each, x and x, and 3 and 3, into both sets of parentheses. Now, what makes it negative? Well, the only two things that we multiply together to get a negative are what? A positive and a negative. So what we'll do is we'll put a positive sign and a negative sign, and guess what? We now have factored this equation. And so our zeros would be -3 and 3. Now, when I say zeros, what I mean by that is where it crosses the x-axis. Okay, so say, for example, this was this, and this was 3, and this was -3. The zeros are where we're crossing the x-axis. Okay, so that is our first problem. Now, if you haven't gotten a packet from me, I am happy to send you a copy of these problems, but what I don't have, or email them to me. You can find me at jbergeron@pcsd.ms. Okay, J Bergeron. Now, the way that that's spelled, it's in the title of the video that you have. All right. So that the next problem that we have is x squared minus x minus 20 equals 0. Okay? Now, is this a perfect square? Well, no, because 20, there are no two exact numbers that we can multiply together that are whole that give us 20. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our formula this time. Now, we need to break that down. What is our a in this quadratic equation? Well, the a would be the understood 1, okay? Now, what would the b be? Well, we look in front of the x and we have a negative sign. What there is there is also an understood 1, so our b will be negative 1. Okay? Now, what will be our c? Well, our c will be negative 20. Okay? All right. Now, we're going to plug these values, a, b, and c, back into our equation. Now, what does that look like? Well, the first thing we do is we put a negative sign because there's a negative sign in the equation, and then we put b. Well, what's b? It's a negative 1. Okay? Now, then we do plus or minus, and then the square root of b squared. B squared is 1 minus, and then in parentheses we'll write 4, and then in parentheses we'll write 1, and then in parentheses we'll write negative 20. Now, is this totally required that we put everything in parentheses? Well, no, it's not. But in order to keep track, many times I recommend to students that you put the parentheses around it so that you will be able to type this into your calculator with more ease so that the calculator knows exactly what you're trying to say. Okay? So if we go ahead and put this over 2a, 2 times a is simply 2, because a was 1 times 2 gives us 2. Well, the first thing we're going to solve is what's underneath the discriminant. Now, when I say discriminant, I mean this square root box right here, okay? So negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 20, which gives us 80, all right? And that's positive 80. 80 plus 1 is 81. Forgive me, I'm trying to see if we can see that underneath here. So we have negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 81 over 2. Okay? All right. So we know what the square root of 81 is. The square root of 81 is 9. So our answer will be negative 1 plus or minus 9 divided by 2. Okay? Now, I'm going to tilt you just a little bit. Forgive me. I'm going to tilt it so that we can keep going down. I'm always a vertical type algebra person. All right. So then we have two different equations. Negative 1 plus 9 divided by 2, and negative 1 minus 9 divided by 2. So negative 1 plus 9 is 8, divided by 2 would be 4. And negative 1 minus 9 would be negative 10, divided by 2 would be negative 5. So what has that given us? It has given us both of the zeros. So if we were to draw this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this would do this kind of thing. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and move on. All right. I am going to put the quadratic formula a little bit higher up so that we can operate with the rest of this. Okay? So what's next? Number 3. We've got 3x squared plus 16x plus 5 equals 0. All right. So we're taking a look, and we know that that's not the difference of two squares. And the first reason is difference means subtract, right? Okay. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and figure out what our A, our B, and our C are. Okay. Well, the first thing we see is x squared, and it is got a coefficient of 3, so we put 3. Our B would be 16 because it's what's next to the x. And our C would be 5. Okay? Now, we're going to take those values again and plug them in to our equation. So negative B, so negative, and in parentheses, we've got our B, plus or minus the square root of B squared, that's 16 squared, minus 4 in parentheses times A, which is 3, times C, which is 5. Which is 5. All over 2 times A, which is 6. Okay? Now that went pretty fast. I took my B and I put it here. I did B squared and then minus 4A and C, just like the equation says, right? Just like the equation says. So right off the top of my head, forgive me, I need to get a calculator. Okay, so what do we do if we don't have a calculator? One of those nice fancy calculators that they have at school. Well, 16 squared is also 16 times 16. Many of you have a phone. There's also the Desmos option. You can reach into Desmos and have that help you as well. Maybe you have one of those calculators at home. Any calculator that does the 4 functions, add, subtract, multiply, and divide, should be enough for what we're doing here. Okay? All right. So 16 squared is 256. 256. And again, we're working on the discriminant first. And then negative 4 times 3 is 12. Times 5 is 60. Okay, negative 60. All right. Now, we will bring down what we've got left here. That's negative 16 plus or minus over 6. Now, what is 256 minus 60? Well, 256 minus 60 is 196. Okay, so it would be negative 16 plus or minus the square root of 196 divided by 6. Okay. Now, the square root of 196, and again, we're working on the discriminants first. The square root of 196 would be 14. Okay. So we've got negative 16 plus 14 divided by 6 and negative 16 minus 14 divided by 6. Okay. So negative 16 plus 14 would be negative 2. divided by 6 would be negative 1/3. And negative 16 minus 14 is negative 30 divided by 6 would be negative 5. Okay? Remember, if we follow the directions, if we follow the formula, if we do our steps, there's not a single problem that we have that should give us any sort of trouble. Okay? All right. All right, so let's start with something maybe just a little bit tougher. So what have we got here? Negative x squared minus 3x plus 4 equals 0. Okay? Now, the first thing you're going to notice is this is our first problem that has a negative as a part of the coefficient next to the x squared. Okay? What we don't want is we don't want a to be a negative number. We want it to be a positive number. So there are two different ways that we can go about this in terms of making it into a positive number. Well, the first thing is we could divide everything by negative 1. And that would give us x squared plus 3x minus 4 equals 0. Or we could, if we were to move everything over to the other side of the 0 using the property of equality, if I added the x squared over here, it would be x squared. That's plus x squared. If I added, the 3x over here, that would be plus 3x. And if we subtracted the 4x or the 4 to move it over here, it would be minus 4. All right. So we can either divide everything by negative 1 or simply move it to the other side of the 0. Okay. So now that we've done that, this becomes just like all the other problems. Well, what is my A? My A is 1 because there's an understood 1 in front of the x squared. What's my B? Well, my B would be 3. And what would be my C? It would be negative 4. All right. We've got our values. We can go ahead and plug it back into the quadratic equation. Okay. So negative B plus or minus the square root B squared minus 4 times A times C divided by 2 times A and 2 times 1 is 2. Okay. Now, we want to immediately work on what's under the discriminant first. And 3 squared is 9. And negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. So what do we have? We have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 25 divided by 2. Now, that's me jumping one more step without writing it down, and forgive me for that. But 3 squared is 9, and multiplying these three numbers gives me positive 16. And 9 plus 16, if you check it in your calculator, should be 25. Okay? So, do we know what the square root of 25 is? Yes, it's a perfect square. It's a 5, right? So what do? We write down negative 3 plus 5 divided by 2, and negative 3 minus 5 divided by 2. What does that give us? Well, negative 3 plus 5 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And then negative 3 minus 5 would be negative 8. Divided by 2 is negative 4. Okay. So our zeros, where the quadratic equation would cross the x-axis, would be at 1 and negative 4. Okay. All right. So our next equation would be 3x squared minus 48 equals 0. Okay. What do you see different here? Well, what you see different here is all the other quadratic equations to this point have had what? 3 different terms. They've all been trinomials, right? But we know that this is a quadratic because the highest exponent is squared, and we can use our formula to determine what the zeros are and how to factor this, right? Okay, so what is our A? Well, that's easy because it's the 3. It's the number next to the x squared, right? Well, what's our B? Uh-oh. Now we have a problem. There is no B given. Well, in the absence of a number, what do we use to hold its place? Well, we always use the number 0. Okay, 0. And C is negative 48. All right. So negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times A, or 2 times 3, is 6. It's a whole lot of zeros, isn't it? It's okay. We're going to make it through. So, do we need the negative 0? Well, no. We don't even have to worry about that. But we do have to remember the plus and minus, right? We'll have to remember the plus and minus. So what have we got here? 0 squared is 0. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Negative 12 times negative 48. Forgive me. Negative 12 times negative 48 is 576. All right, divided by 6. Now, again, we're going to stick with the discriminant, and we need to find out the square root of 576, and that comes to 24. So what are the answers? Well, the answers would be 24 divided by 6 is 4. Negative 24 divided by 6 would give us negative 4. Okay. So remember, in the absence of an A, in the absence of a B or a C, we will use the number 0. Okay? In the absence of B or C. Okay. I have one more to do. Okay? So this one says 4x squared minus 20x plus 25. And this is a little bit different. We're going to use what's called the slip and slide method. And what we'll do first is we'll multiply the leading coefficient times the C. So 4 times 25 equals 100. Okay, 4 quarters equals $1. Now, what we'll have to do is we'll have to make our chart, as many of you have seen, and 100 will go in the first part, and negative 20, this number right here, will go on the right. Okay. So what are the factors of 100? Well, we know it's 1 times 100, 2 times 50, 4 times 25, 5 times 20, 6 won't go, 7 won't go, 8 won't go, 9 won't go, 10 will go. And I think we've exhausted our possibilities, right? Well, what we have to do is we have to look to see if there are any of these that will give us negative 20. Well, obviously, one will have to be, with a bigger number, will have to be what? Will have to be negative, because we've got ourselves a negative, right? So negative 100 plus 1 would be 99. That's no good. 50 minus 2 gives us 48. Again, we're not getting what we need. All right. 25 minus 4 is 21. 20 minus 5 is 15. But look here, I've got 10 and 10 right here. So what could I do to give myself a positive 100? Well, what if I did both of those as negatives? Okay. So negative 10 plus negative 10 gives us negative 20. Aha. So that helps immensely, right? Okay. So we take it back over here, just like when we're factoring, and we write x minus 10 and x minus 10. Now, why did we do that? Because negative 10 and negative 10 are our factors that we're going to need, right? Now, when we add back our leading coefficient, what we're going to come up with is we're going to come up with x is 5 halves and x, I'm sorry, there's no need to write that twice. X equals negative 5 halves. They will give us both. Okay. Now, I teach a whole lot of different things. So again, let me encourage you, if you found me or if you watch this and are more confused than when you started, go back to Miss Lott, go back to the factoring and check that over. Now, I also have a terminology or terms video that will go over some of these terms again. Thank you so very much, and have a great summer.